Hey. My name's Jon Gold. I work with the Giffords Association as a executive consultant, and I'm here to moderate a panel of gun safety champions today. I'm really lucky today that the title of this is not what we can do, but what we've done and where we're heading. We've done incredible work in Michigan in the last 14 months. And a lot of the champions of that work are sitting here with us today. We also want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about all the new laws that we did pass after years of effort, fighting against different parties and different administrations. We're here today to celebrate the work we've done and to make sure everyone understands it. We've made significant change, and we want everyone to know what those changes mean. Before we get to our legislative champions today, I want to hand things over to Jada Knight, a student from Oxford, Michigan, who's a leader of a group of students that I've gotten very close with, No Future Without Today. Jada, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you, Jon. And thank you all for being here. My name is Jada. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a college freshman media director for No Future Without Today, which is a student-led 501c4 social welfare organization that advocates for the safety and well-being of students and educators through sensible gun safety legislation and expanded mental health care. We were founded in 2022 by survivors of the Oxford High School shooting that killed 4 students, Hannah St. Juliana, Tate Meir, Justin Schilling, and Madison Baldwin, and injured 7 others. As someone who did not attend Oxford High School, but is from Oxford, I joined No Future Without Today to support the work of students in my community, and because I believe this work should not fall solely on survivors, rather it is collective responsibility. That being said, thank you for being here. Your presence today represents your valiant commitment to protecting Michiganders. Like Jon said, last year we made incredible progress here in Michigan. We passed 4 major laws: universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders, safe storage, and protections for domestic violence survivors. And this is a major accomplishment that we should celebrate, but it didn't just happen. It took years of organizing and far too many tragedies. After the Oxford shooting, despite promising Oxford families a hearing on safe storage, our state legislators refused and let yet another year end with 0 action on gun violence in our state. As a result of the decades of inaction and apathy out of Lansing, students and advocates across the state marched, lobbied, and confronted our lawmakers to make our voices heard. Now let's make one thing clear. This shouldn't have been necessary. None of this should have happened in the first place. The problem of school shootings and gun violence in our state should have been fixed long ago, and Tate, Justin, Madison, Hannah, and the thousands of people stolen by gun violence in Michigan should still be here. My generation has the burden of stopping decades of inaction, apathy, and corruption. We have been tasked with disrupting a system that prioritizes the gun industry and political favors over kids' lives. And we've been tasked with proving to legislators that the lives of their constituents matter more than their next election win or donor check. But when we finally voted in a gun sense majority, thanks in large part to the voting power of young people, we finally had the chance we needed. We had partners in Lansing who are willing to work with us and vote for change. The young people, parents, teachers, and communities who are tired of living in fear are fighting back, and we're finally able to collaborate with our lawmakers instead of constantly being disregarded. So I want to start by thanking those advocates, those students, families, and parents who committed so much of their time, energy, sleepless nights, and study time to making this progress. Each one of your roles in this movement is integral to saving lives. And of course, a big thank you to our legislators that are here with us today. They have done their jobs and stood side by side with us. They were advocates for us and with us, recognizing the importance of representative constituent dialogue. Without them and their commitment to making a safer future Michigan's reality, this progress would have never been possible. They made promises to us and they kept those promises. So thank you for your leadership. Let us also not forget that even our partners in Lansing depend on us, students, activists, community leaders, and voters. To make this change, we built a collective. We built a movement, person by person, vote by vote, speech by speech, protest by protest. Our movement put these issues on the top of the agenda last year, and we're not going to stop. Thank you.
Thanks, Jada, for grounding this conversation right at the beginning. I'm proud to next move to the person I have known the longest since I started being part of this fight, and that's Senator Rosemary Bayer.
John, and thank you, Jada, for your incredible activism. Just an amazing thing. I'm the state senator for District 13, and thank you all. Thank you, Jada, and all the people that were part of getting me reelected. This was one of the major issues at the time, and it really did matter. I am a gun violence survivor. I've had 2 suicides close to me, once when I was in junior high and once more recently, both by suicide with a gun. So when I was first elected to the Senate, I wanted to do something to help prevent suicide. My first bills were for extremist protection orders, proven to prevent suicide in other states. I soon learned that no firearm legislation would pass under the current Republican leadership, but I joined the Small Gun Violence Prevention Caucus and got involved in other firearm regulation issues. 2 years later, Representative Carter and I were asked to co-chair the caucus. So we created new bills and the caucus began to grow, but we couldn't pass legislation. We focused on prevention, which did get us some violence prevention programs running very successfully around the state, and the Office of Violence Prevention, which is dedicated to this issue. Oxford was my district, my hometown, actually. My family members were in the school that day, and the pain for the entire community has been simply unbearable. Oxford became a rallying cry for all of us in the legislature, and many people joined the caucus. It grew to 50 people. Many new pieces of legislation created because of Oxford and what happened at Michigan State as well. With a majority position gained in November of 22, my team got to work immediately in November, updating those most critical bills to align with the national groups in other states, hoping we could pass them in 23. By the time we had bills on the floor in early 23, we had introduced safe storage, universal background checks, and extremist protection orders at least 6 times over the previous 12 years. So my first real message to you all here today is that change like this is hard. It takes perseverance, patience, and dedicated work. If you do the work, you'll be ready when the time is right, and you will make a difference on this issue. I'm going to talk about 2 of those 3 bill packages that we first passed in the spring, and then there's a 4th package you'll also hear about today. But I'm going to talk about universal background checks and safe storage very briefly. These are seen as baseline for states around the country who are doing this work. Big problem. In Michigan, only a tiny percentage of gun purchases have any kind of background checks. We have background checks only at federally licensed firearm dealers and only for handguns. It's impossible to know for certain how many firearms we have in Michigan, but most guns are not purchased from licensed firearm dealers. They're bought at trade shows, flea markets, garage sales, from their neighbors, any way at all, and no background checks. A background check itself ensures that a purchaser is not prohibited due to a felony or disqualifying mental illness. That's it. With the new laws, everyone who buys or is given a gun, regardless of whether it's through private sale or not, will be subject to a simple background check. Most gun owners in Michigan are in favor of this legislation. The second bill package covers safe storage for firearms, and this is really personal for me. If we had laws for secure storage, my 15-year-old neighbor would not have had access to his dad's gun and would not have died in 10th grade. My 40-year-old cousin would not have had access to his mom's handgun and would still be with us today if that gun had been securely stored and he couldn't get access to it. Most suicides are with guns, and most gun deaths are suicide. And then there was Oxford, where I lived down the street from the high school, my district. My family were there, my friends, the entire community impacted. And as you heard from Jada, as you all know, 4 students died. This would not have happened if the teenage shooter didn't have access to a gun. Guns are the #1 cause of death for children in our country. These tragedies would often be avoidable if guns were stored properly and securely. So the new laws say that if there are children in the home, firearms must be stored securely, like using a gun safe or a trigger lock, and that includes visitors. If there are children, guns must be securely stored. When the bills goes into effect, A person purchasing a firearm will be informed about the law and the penalties if a child gets access to the firearm that's not locked. The purchaser will have to show an existing lock or buy a new one at that time. This will prevent gun accidents, theft, suicide, and school shootings. States that have implemented strong safe storage laws have seen significant declines in youth firearm injuries. In Florida, youth firearm deaths went down 52% in the first year. We're really looking forward to our first year here. This is common sense, right? Polls around the state consistently show that most gun owners in Michigan are in favor of this legislation. Responsible gun owners already store their firearm safety. Unfortunately, many people are not informed about the critical importance of safe storage. They don't do it. They're unaware of the problem and the simple low-cost solution, and they're unaware of these new laws. All gun owners will be held responsible. Penalties for violating safe storage laws can be severe, up to a 15-year felony. Widespread compliance is this law will substantially reduce the number of child gun injuries and deaths. It's proven in other states. So here's what we need to do to make this law powerful and to save lives. In Oxford and in Michigan State, I have gotten to know many of these sensational young people like Jada who have become true leaders on the issue of gun violence. They are working now to get the word out about these new laws, helping people understand the rules, driving positive change, making sure people lock up their guns. We need this kind of help all over the state. We need a major public education campaign. People can't comply with a law that they don't know about, right? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. We just need to educate them. Schools can educate parents. Local government folks, how about we educate our constituents? Clergy, how about telling your congregation? Media, let's see some PSAs. We can all do something to get the word out, to change behaviors, and to save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. As a responsible gun owner, no one appreciates what you said more than I do right now. In fact, if you want to shoot that PSA in my house, call me. I'll volunteer. I want to next hand it over to another one of my phenomenal friends in this movement. I'm lucky enough to have Representative Pohutsky on this call. And I know because I was nervous, I just botched your title and I apologize.
You're good.
So thanks, Laurie.
Thank you, Jon. And thank you, Jada, for sharing your time and for all of your incredible advocacy around all of this work. My name is Laurie Pohutsky. I represent the 17th House District in the Michigan State House of Representatives, and I also serve as a Speaker Pro Tem. I am also a survivor of gun violence. I am a survivor of domestic violence, where my abuser used weapons and was in the process of attempting to purchase a handgun when we ultimately went our separate ways. So we're going to talk a little bit later about a bill package that is very near and dear to my heart. But I want to talk today about extreme risk protection orders. So, you know, I've mentioned that as a survivor of gun violence, all of these laws were a priority for me. And I can confidently say they were also a priority for Speaker Joe Tate and our whole caucus. This was a whirlwind of a session that we had back in last year. We had 40 years with a majority that did not value people's lives over guns. So we had a lot of catching up to do. So there were a lot of late nights trying to get as much done as we could as quickly as possible, because as Jada already pointed out, the tragedy at MSU didn't need to happen to begin with. That's because we were already behind on what we needed to do. So we knew that the issues of gun violence and protecting kids, families, survivors of domestic abuse, they matter to everyone in our caucus. Many of us have been touched by gun violence. So I want everyone that's on this call to know we heard you. We're going to keep working with you to make change. But as I said, I do want to talk a little bit about extreme risk protection orders, which was one of the first 3 packages that we passed early last year. Sometimes these are called red flag laws, but extreme risk protection orders are tools that allow us to remove firearms from a situation before someone gets hurt. It works by basically if someone owns a gun and they become a danger to themselves or others, and there's documented evidence of this. That could be a family member, law enforcement, a medical professional can file a petition with the court. So in this case, family includes your nuclear family, an intimate partner, or a former intimate partner. A judge can rapidly review the evidence that's listed in that petition. If the judge agrees that the gun owner is a danger to themselves or someone else, the judge can order that the guns be removed for 1 year. Depending on the situation, the gun owner can, or they will receive a notice that they need to turn in their weapons to law enforcement within 24 hours. Or if the situation is more urgent than that, law enforcement can go and retrieve the guns immediately rather than giving that 24-hour window. If the gun owner does not agree with the order, they can appeal the decision and they would have a hearing before the judge. While the order is enforced, the subject may not own, possess, or purchase guns or ammunition. If the order expires after 1 year, but the court can renew it. So first, I want to talk about why it's important. Extreme risk protection orders are about stopping something bad before it happens. They're a powerful tool to prevent suicide. Listening to the testimony during the committee hearings for these, I was really struck by the testimony of a member of Moms Demand Action while we were debating these bills. Her family knew that her brother had become suicidal. They called the police and they said there was nothing they could do. They went to local gun stores with flyers and begged with owners to not sell him a gun. But one of them did anyway, and he took his own life. An extreme risk protection order could have stopped this situation, and it would have given the family time to get their loved one the mental health resources that they needed. So that's the goal. Put some time and put some distance between a bad situation and a weapon. It's also a tool that law enforcement can use to prevent violence without arresting anyone or putting them in jail. There's no criminal penalty for an extreme risk protection order. If you comply and you hand over your weapons, you are never charged with anything. So police departments who want to reduce gun violence can use this tool to de-escalate situations, reduce harm, and build community trust without incarcerating people. Third, this is a tool to prevent mass shootings. Many times the people in the life of a mass shooter know that something is wrong. Their behavior changes, they post threats on social media. It's not often that these things just come out of the blue and nobody had an inkling ahead of time. So for example, the most recent mass shooting in Lewiston, Maine. The shooter's family, the police, the military all knew that this person had become dangerous. What they lacked was a tool to intervene and disarm them before the damage was already done. On the other hand, if you take the case of Caleb Cole from King County, Washington in 2019, Cole was a self-professed neo-Nazi. He organized military-style training camps for fascists and was building an arsenal to start a literal race war. None of this was a secret. He bragged about it on social media. It was known. So the King County prosecutor decided not to wait until Cole actually tried to start this war. They filed for an extreme risk protection order and seized dozens of assault rifles and handguns. Cole was later convicted of hate crimes and conspiracy for threatening Jewish community leaders. Thanks to that extreme risk protection order, he was disarmed before he was able to act on his hateful ideology. Finally, extreme risk protection orders can reduce the risk of domestic violence murder. My colleague, Senator Chang, is going to talk about about domestic violence more specifically, but this is really important to me personally, so I did just want to mention it one more time. There are unfortunately a lot of people who are in abusive relationships and they're afraid to leave because their abuser owns a gun. And they're right to be afraid. 70 Michigan women and children are killed with a gun by an abuser every year. Now with extreme risk protection orders, they have a tool to make that situation safer. A survivor, a family member, or the police can intervene and have the gun taken out of that situation. This reduces that risk that the survivor will become a victim, and it makes it easier to get help. Taken together with the new domestic violence laws that we're going to discuss here in a second, we're sending a strong message to survivors. We're here for you. So what do we need to do to implement these laws? First, law enforcement agencies need to familiarize themselves with the best practices for utilizing and enforcing extreme risk orders. There's a panel tomorrow specifically addressing this topic, and many of the speakers are going to be available as trainers for local police departments. Schools also need to become more familiar with this tool. Though teachers are not reporters, counselors and school safety officers are. And lastly, we need to educate the public. family members need to understand that they can use this tool alongside existing protections like traditional personal protection orders. I want to close by saying how proud I am to have worked with many people on the stage and in the audience today on these bills. It's a partnership between legislators, advocates, survivors, and voters that makes change like this possible. And it is a prime example of co-governance at work. This work is personal for me, and I know it is for everyone else here. So thank you all, and I'm going to hand things over to my friend, Senator Stephanie Chang.
Thank you so much, Representative Pohutsky, and thanks to everyone for being here. And thank you to every single activist and gun violence survivor and community leader who helped make gun violence prevention policies possible here in Michigan. I'm really proud to serve as the chair for the Senate Committee on Civil Rights, Judiciary, and Public Safety, where we held hearings where we heard many hours of impactful, emotional testimony from survivors at MSU, at Oxford, and elsewhere in this state. And after many years, we're able to finally take action on universal background checks, extreme risk protection orders, and safe storage. But equally important, as was mentioned, is our package on domestic violence. In late 2023, Michigan took action to protect domestic violence survivors from firearm injury and abuse in their homes. Nearly half of all women murdered in the United States are killed by a current or former intimate partner, and more than half of those homicides are by firearm. Many of you have heard this statistic before, and it was shocking to me when I first learned it, and it's important to continue to reiterate it. Women are 5 times more likely to be murdered by an abusive partner when that abuser has access to a gun. So I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do on our legislation to protect survivors by changing access to a gun. And I want to really express my gratitude to Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy, who came to me with this idea 6 years ago now, as well as the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence, the Michigan Domestic and Sexual Violence Prevention and Treatment Board, the Attorney General, Dana Nessel, every town, every mom who demanded action, every student who demanded action, Giffords, Brady, of course, No Future Without Today, gun violence survivors, and the Michigan State Police, who all worked with us to develop and refine the legislation that will save countless lives. Also, I really want to note that this has been a bipartisan issue from the very beginning. Former Senator Wayne Schmidt, former Representative Mary Whiteford, as well as current Democratic Representative Amos O'Neill, Sue Shink in the Senate, have all worked together with me on this. And so it's been a really great bipartisan effort. More than anyone else, though, I want to thank all of those who stepped up across the state, including and especially the O'Million family in Kalamazoo and many others who shared their tragic yet powerful stories of losing their loved ones. Thank you for your courage, for your persistence, and for turning pain into purpose. We all know that domestic violence can escalate. What might be a more minor incident the first time or the second time might become a more violent or dangerous situation later on. And one study found that 76% of intimate partner homicides and 85% of attempted homicides of women were preceded by at least one incident of stalking in the year before the attack. These new laws will keep firearms out of the hands of people that are very likely to be a danger to others, individuals convicted of misdemeanor domestic violence. They would be prohibited from possessing, purchasing, selling, or transporting a gun for 8 years after the completion of their sentence. Law enforcement officials and victim advocates have learned how to recognize the use of a gun by an abuser to threaten or intimidate their partner as a key predictor for intimate partner homicides. So I'm really proud to say that Michigan is now one of 32 states, including numerous Republican-led legislatures in Washington, D.C., who have these laws on the books. This set of bills is a common sense bipartisan solution to protecting domestic violence survivors in our state and was passed in the legislature with support from Democrats and some Republicans. Moving forward, it is my hope that we can continue to provide additional resources to domestic violence organizations and shelters for legal advocacy, for holistic support for survivors. We know that many shelters across the state are understaffed and more people are needed. in order to help file PPOs, to help file ERPOs and explain this new domestic violence law. We also need to continue to educate the public and do everything that we can to lift up and support survivors themselves. I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Patrick Carter from the University of Michigan Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention, but thank you again for having me.
Thanks so much, Senator Chang. And I just first want to say thank you to all the legislators here today and all of their work on these issues, as well as Jada for her comments at the beginning. I'm Pat Carter. I'm the co-director of the Institute for Firearm Injury Prevention at the University of Michigan. Our work is not to advocate for specific policies, but actually to analyze what works and what doesn't work for firearm injury prevention. And I come at this from the angle of being an emergency physician and seeing far too many people end up in the emergency room with injuries, and a certain number of people who don't make it there in the first place. And feeling that prevention is really the only way to approach this issue to have the broad impact that we're looking to have. And each of the bills and laws that you heard about today has a strong evidence base behind it in terms of showing that it worked. They've worked in other states and they've worked in other states across the country. And so it's really a great advancement here for the state of Michigan. You know, I approach this issue thinking about it similar to how we approach motor vehicle crash injury. There's no one policy or one program to solve this problem. And there wasn't one policy or one program to reduce motor vehicle crash injury. But over the past 50 years, we've made incredible strides in reducing crash injuries and death. And that's been through engineering solutions that have made better cars and seatbelts and airbags, urban planners who've built better roads, changing driver behavior around alcohol and driving and speeding and enhancing the use of seatbelts. We need the same type of action in terms of firearm injury prevention. Each of these bills that you heard about today will tackle one aspect of the problem. There are other programs and other policies that should be considered as we move forward, but they will each address some aspect of the problem, and in their totality will help to reduce firearm injury prevention here in Michigan as well as throughout the nation. Michigan has made a lot of great strides over the past year, both with these laws as well as the investment in community violence intervention across the state. At the Institute, we are helping to evaluate those programs, and we'll help to evaluate these laws as they're put in place to see how they work and for whom they work and how well they work and what additional measures may be needed to help reduce firearm injury across the state. So I just wanted to take this time to say thank you to all the legislators for their work. And you'll be hearing more throughout the day about the different policies and how they work and how they can be implemented in a really strong way across the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Carter. Appreciate it, and appreciate you being here today and in multiple sessions to be held later. I'm going to introduce somebody new to the call. Toby Barlow. Getting the word out is going to be a big piece of what's next for Michigan. I think I heard all three legislators use the word education in a sentence. Can you talk to us about how we might be able to reach out and what programs you might have going forward to help us get the word out to Michigan?
Yeah, thanks. So I run an advertising marketing agency called Lafayette American. And, you know, we, like a lot of Americans, like a lot of Michiganders, have been looking for ways to lean in on this issue for a while. And we were just really, you know, engaged when we saw this opportunity. You know, I want to thank all the legislators and everybody who's helped get this law passed. Like too many people on these call on this webinar, I've personally felt the impact. I've had people die, neighbors and friends who, you know, these laws would have helped. These laws would have saved, right? These laws would have kept guns out of people's hands. So it's wonderful that they've passed. But, you know, in the last session, Garland Gilchrist said preventable deaths are policy failures. And I would add to that preventable deaths are communication failures. And that's why Lafayette American is so engaged, because we see this as an opportunity to get the word out to all of Michiganders. We've seen this work. We've done work with ACLU about voter registration. We did work with period.org, which helped repeal the taxes on feminine hygiene products. We know that when you lean in and you get the word out, people hear it, people respond to it. When we connected with, End Gun Violence Michigan just a few weeks ago, we were thrilled to learn that this is a moment where our skills are needed. So I'm really happy to announce, Lafayette American is going to make a major commitment to produce a full spectrum of marketing and advertising to get the word out on these laws, right? We want every parent to understand new safe storage laws. We want every resident to understand extreme risk protection orders. And we need survivors of domestic violence to know they have more protection from gun violence. So we're looking, any lever that we can, social, digital, radio, television. We're just at the initial sort of strategy. As I mentioned, it's only been a couple of weeks since we started working with the team here, but everybody in our agency is leaning into this. As I said, this is pro bono for us. We're doing all the work and the development of the content for free, but as you guys know, the media costs money, the TV stations, the billboards, radio, et cetera. So I know that End Gun Violence Michigan is raising money, and if donors are on this call and looking for a way to have impact, that is going to be a big one.
Toby, that's an incredible commitment. We really thank you for putting your agency's skills to work to make a safer Michigan, man. That's a really phenomenal commitment for an agency to make, and thank you. I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I wanted to say some thank yous to some people on this call. I met with Laurie when I first started my GVP career. It was Rosemary who walked me into Senator Chang's hearing when I was nervous and shaking about testifying. It was Senator Chang who made sure that my voice as a survivor and a transcender of gun violence got heard. There are heroes on this call. Dr. Carter, the work you're doing to make sure that we have data, not just theory, but data, that's hero work too. And Toby, you making this commitment. Everybody on this call has made a huge commitment to the safety of the state of Michigan. And it has been a wonderful and refreshing change from the past when a lot of us wanted these things and couldn't get them. I want to go back to Jada for a second. Jada, I'm gonna guess the youngest person on this call. When we heard in the earlier session from Maya that she needs us to stick around, that this can't just be the responsibility of the youth movement. What more do you need from us? What would you like to see our generation stand up and do next?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to echo what Maya said, because I think that is so huge in gun violence prevention. We hear a lot about, thank God for your generation, that you're going to get us out of this mess. When in reality, we have a lot of generations before us who can still commit their time and energy to this fight. And so at No Future Without Today, we try to prioritize education and center fortifying people with facts, but also humanizing the issue, because I think we can also get really caught up in the statistics. So I think in a lot of ways, what we need from older generations is for you to continue that dialogue, especially with your more conservative friends or with your gun owner friends. Continue that dialogue and talk about gun violence as a human rights issue, talk about it as a human issue, and also talk about it as a policy issue, and center the importance of voting and how you use your vote to prioritize lives over guns. And it's also show up to these protests, show up to your legislators' office hours, and show up, or coffee hours, sorry, I'm in school mode. Show up and make sure that your voice is heard and that you are being a voice for your children, for your grandkids, because you are still here and you do still have that power. Oh, John, I think you're muted.
And now it's official. This is a Zoom call. Someone has talked into their mute button. Senator Bayer, is there a what's next on the floor yet for this year or next? Are there other objectives that we're looking towards in the new year?
I think there's a lot of different things that are in the works. We'd like to really stretch and take advantage of the kind of the makeup of the legislature and the strength we have right now to move some things forward. I know that we have some more suicide prevention work going on, work with potentially a lot of prevention things. We'll take advantage of the Office of Violence Prevention and really build out some of the things that we've proven in those first few years. There's grant money available. There's a lot of opportunity within communities to make a very solid difference. There's other pieces of legislation. I don't know if I want to give out what other folks are working on right now, but I think you should expect to see a number of new things coming out this year. There's many things that we didn't get to that we were very focused on those first big bills, but there's other things like age limits and capacity limits and kind of the assault weapon banning and things like that. You probably will see some of those things, and then maybe even stretch a little farther and work toward how do we limit manufacturers in some way and hold them accountable in some way. So big goals, lots of big things that we hope to be able to do. We're not giving up.
I would never believe that you would give up. Laurie, I know this is a personal issue for you as a survivor, and I use the word transcender all the time now because we didn't just survive. All the survivors on this call are here doing something about it, and that means we've transcended that violence, and that's something I like to point out. So thank you to all of you on this call who've been through the horror of gun violence and are here working for something better. Toby, as far as the packages, I've got a question in the Q&A. One, if you could tell people about your organization again, specifically a little bit about who you are and maybe some of the projects you've worked on in the past in the private arena. Are you free to do that?
Sure. So Lafayette American is a marketing agency, as I mentioned. We're Detroit based. We're about 6 years old. A lot of us came from auto marketing. I ran Ford's creative department basically for about a decade. And we really are looking to diversify and kind of be more than auto, right? So we've kind of done a range of things from everything from Netflix to Amazon to we just launched a campaign for StockX and Google. So, we do a wide range of things, but when we have the time and the bandwidth, we actually try to lean in on things that we think will make a positive impact in our community.
Thanks. Another question we have, and I might answer this one, but I'm not supposed to. So we obviously have passed some really cool things here in the state of Michigan to make people safer. But our databases, someone's asking if there's a database sufficient to ensure that someone subject to an ERPO can't purchase another gun in another state. Is there a national answer to this? Or are we kind of Michigan-centric at this point and know what we can do here? The question seems to be, are we going to share information? Are our ERPOs going to be shared with people, with law enforcement in Ohio and Indiana and Illinois? Or is this going to stay a Michigan enterprise until something can be done nationally? Anyone want it? Going once?
Senator Chang, it looked like you were about to weigh in.
I mean, unfortunately, we have lots of wonderful ideas, probably all of us, about things that we could do at the federal level, but we are in Michigan in terms of the state legislature. I think that in terms of some kind of national database, that is something that Congress would need to really develop. As you all know, not every state has passed an extremist protection order, but there are obviously databases out there for related to universal background checks. So maybe there's something there that could be explored, but as far as something that tracks extremist protection orders, I'm not totally sure, but maybe Senator Bayer or Dr. Carter might have more.
One comment on that, if that's okay. we have, one of the things we are doing is working directly with our congressional representatives in moving things to the federal government level, right? Many of the things that we are talking about, it's very appropriate to do them federally. It would make a lot of sense. And so I know that our safe storage laws, for example, have been introduced in the Congress and continue to progress forward. So there's been updates and working with other states. Every time you get a group of Congress people together, that then expands the ideas that we're doing here. So I think that's important. And all of the folks here on the call can consider that as well in their activism, that, you know, working with folks from your congressional district as well is a good place to go and start talking about, you know what, this really should be national. We shouldn't have to do this state by state, and see if we can keep moving things in that direction.
Thank you. Jada, I have a question I think that goes to you. How can we reach the youth who aren't familiar with gun violence campaigns? What are the ways we can get them more informed and more involved that maybe our generation isn't familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely. I think social media has been a big help in making a lot of youth aware of gun violence and gun violence campaigns. But I think also just the fact that so many youth deal with gun violence on a pretty frequent basis, whether that be in their communities or prepping for it in schools through drills. So I think a lot of youth are aware, but definitely I think there can be a lack of awareness of like what is being done, especially what is being done in a student-led capacity. So I think first and foremost, share the social medias of student-led groups. When you see opportunities to get involved, share that with the youth in your life, but also get involved with them. So like if there's a protest, go to the protest with them. If your legislator is having one of their coffee hours, take them to the coffee hours. And I think also kind of like what I said before, is talking to your friends about gun violence, open that conversation up with the youth in your life as well. Because it's likely that they're thinking about it as well, but they just haven't started that conversation with you. So I think just being open and sharing any opportunity you see with the youth in your life, but also recognizing that it shouldn't be all youth's responsibility to be in gun violence prevention work. That shouldn't be our responsibility. So if they're interested, encourage it and support it. But first and foremost, do what you can. I think that would be my best answer for that.
Thanks. This one is from a member of the Physicians for Prevention of Gun Violence. He asks, we've heard that in more rural counties, sheriffs and others are saying they're not going to enforce gun violence prevention laws. What are our thoughts about how we can best educate them and or make sure that those laws are enforced even when there's resistance?
I know that our Attorney General, Dana Nessel, is strongly in support of this new law and has publicly stated that she will do whatever she needs to do to ensure that our law enforcement around the state are following the law. Hopefully we won't encounter those problems, but you never know. But I do know that, you know, this is something that our Attorney General feels very strongly about, and she has the power to make sure that folks do what the law says.
Right.
Can I just add one quick point to that,
Sure.
John? Is I think the implementation here, the support for implementation is so critical, because I think you know, as police and law enforcement become educated about the ERPO mechanism, why it works, how it works, there's that resistance, I think, will diminish. I think people will see it as another tool in their toolbox of tools that they can use to reduce risks and reduce these types of outcomes. So I think it's really important that we support that implementation education that you've heard everybody talk about here, because I think that will help lessen some of that resistance. And the other point I just wanted on the prior question about ERPO in Michigan versus other state is we do need to think about how as these ERPO laws get passed in more and more states, how the federal government can help honor the ERPO legislation in one state in other states as people go to purchase guns. But Michigan obviously will have the record for folks in Michigan.
Yeah, I've got another question. Does the safe storage law include any legal requirements for school districts to educate families? So will we have an arm from the public schools doing gun safety education? Lori just disappeared off my screen. Would either of you senators know if the law extends to a public education plan for students to be educated on gun safety?
Yeah, I don't think there's a law specific to requiring the education system here to do that. I think it is on us to do that. So, we want to make sure that we don't try to push everything on Jada and on our young activists here, but everybody here is in some group, right? And I think I mentioned we should look to clergy, we should look to teachers, right, to deal with parents, right? We could offer opportunities for them. We could have the Department of Education send out information that they could share. I have already got 2 town halls scheduled in February for my district to make sure that everybody that we can reach has access to all the information, understands what it is, how do you do it? So you know that somebody needs an extremist protection order. What exactly do you do? So working with the Attorney General, we're putting together those curriculums to take across our districts, and we'll share all of that with all the rest of the legislators. So all of us and the people that we reach, everyone should look at your own constituency, whatever group you work with, and find ways to talk to them and start to spread the word on this. There's a lot of information, and we all are willing to help and come speak and, do all that kind of stuff. But you have the people.
But if I could,
Toby, did you want to comment?
yeah, I just wanted to sort of chime in. I mean, I think that's a very, very important point to make. These are laws that the overwhelming majority of Michiganders support, right? And the tonality of the conversation is very different. It's not, it's important to remember that there are so many responsible gun owners out there who want every gun owner to be as responsible as they are, right? So when you're, trying to pass laws, a lot of times, the conversation or the debate is fueled to kind of increase the polarity, right? To determine who's on what side. That's very different than once the law has been passed. This is a time for bringing people together, leaning into the things that we all agree on, which is that we all want safer communities. We want our children to be safe. You want to be able to send your kid to a neighbor's house to play and not have to worry about, whether there's going to be an access to gun in the house, right? So we all want this. As Stephanie said, it's very bipartisan. And, just getting the word out as much as possible in a constructive, non-demonizing way, speaking to people who are responsible, who share those same hopes and dreams that we do. So I just think that that's a really important thing to kind of lean into.
Thanks, Toby. Dr. Carter, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think, as we think about that implementation support and dissemination around these laws, it has to occur at every level. So the onus isn't just on one group. It's really about how do we have these large public health campaigns that disseminate the word, but then also at the individual level, how do we work with patients in the exam room around how they store firearms and when somebody might be at risk and when an ERPO might be a tool that can be used to decrease that risk. How do we work in schools? How do we work across different communities that all prioritize, as Toby said, safety in their community? And I think it's thinking about how we can provide that support and that education and that behavior change at all of those levels.
We have so many levers, we have so many social communities, social networking communities we belong to, whether it's Nextdoor or Facebook, et cetera. we can all be promoting and letting people know about these laws right, now.
I want to thank everybody here for their time today. And I think this was a really good forum for ideas. I really appreciate everybody's openness and candor on the subject and your continued efforts, everybody here, to make Michigan a safer place. I know you all have other sessions to get to today besides mine. So if I think Toby's last point was a great way to end this call. Does anybody else, I'm going to ask an old journalist question. Is there a question I didn't ask that someone would like to answer? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. And again, thank you for everything you're doing to make Michigan a safer place.